Hello everyone, this is Terry, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to go through and do a number of demonstrations so that we can talk about what we've been covering in our discussion regarding the basic data center networking concepts. So we've covered a lot of things. We covered the OSI, we covered different elements, but the one component that's missing so far has been looking at devices. Now, what you see in front of you here is an Eve NG, actually Eve Pro session that I have set up that I'm going to use to be able to go through and do a number of tasks. The first task is going to be the idea of basic configuration. So what I've done is I've just simply turned on all of these devices and everything should come up as if it was at its factory default. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on these devices and I'm going to open up sessions to them so that I can access the devices. So this is a little bit out of order, so what I'll do is I'll drag this over, and what we see here is we have the devices in question, and what I want to do is I want to make certain that we can see everything. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring up each of these switches. Now I'm going to have to do this 4 times. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give each of them a host name, and I'm going to do some baseline configuration that is going to require us to know a little bit more about the devices than just how they work from a theoretical perspective. So the first thing I want to do is I need to understand the fact that I have a mechanism called power on auto provisioning. Now power on auto provisioning allows me to be able to pull a configuration file from, say for instance, a USB drive or an FTP server or things along those lines. Now I don't want to do this, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say yes, I want to abort power on auto provisioning, and I immediately know it's going to ask me if I want to use secure passwords, and I'm going to say no, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter. And just for the sake of speed, I'm going to do that on each one of these devices. So let's see what happens. Now, with the idea of disabling power on auto provisioning, now it's going to put me into the baseline configuration wizard. Now, I've already said no, I do not want to enforce secure passwords. This is going to allow me to be able to use my default password that I use for everything, which is going to be capital NX, lowercase os, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll have to repeat this process. And then ultimately it's going to ask me if I got those right, if I want to go ahead and do the basic configuration dialog, and I'm going to say no. I want to do everything manually from scratch. Now, ultimately my box will come up and I'll be presented with a login where I will log in with the password or the user ID of admin and that password that I specified earlier of NXOS12345. And what we see here is we see my screen. Notice that the switch has defaulted to the name of switch. These are all things that I'm going to want to change. So what I'm going to do that is I'm going to enter the configuration capabilities for the system, and I'm going to say I want to change the host name to N9K1, thus matching what's up here. Now, another thing that I'm going to want to do here, just to make certain that we cover all of our foundations, is I need to recognize that these are virtual devices. And Cisco's Nexus 1000V release has some issues. So as an example, I can get everything up and working and configuring, but when I restart these devices, they'll actually come up in a failure mode. So to bypass that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to say I want to boot the Nexus operating system that's located in the boot flash, and the name of that operating system is going to be NXOS 703 i7-3. This is the most recent release of the Nexus Virtual 9K as of the recording of this video. Now, obviously, I'm going to need to do this everywhere, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in and say NXOS12345, NXOS12345, and then I'll say no, and I'll do the base configuration. So I want to enter the configurational mode. So we're used to typing config T a lot. In Nexus, once I get logged in, NXOS12345, it's not important to type configure terminal, but I could. So if I say configure terminal or config T, it's going to put me in the configuration. You saw me use the term host name to change the switch name. Well, another option that I could use is I could actually use the NXOS version of switch name and say I want to change it to 9K-2. 2 and hit enter. And this behaves exactly like host name. So it's just two ways of being able to accomplish the same thing. And then additionally, I'm going to go ahead and say I want to boot the Nexus operating system located at the boot flash with the name of NX OS 703. Go ahead and do the same thing on the remaining two devices. NX OS 12345, NX OS 12345. I fat fingered that, so I made a mistake. So NX OS 12345, NX OS 12345. One of the hazards that you run into is that you don't really have the ability to being able to do a backspace to correct a mistake. So it's definitely something that you want to keep in mind. Would you like to enter the basic configuration mode? I'll say no. Once I get into configuration, I'll go ahead and change this guy's switch name to N9K3. So I want to say admin NXOS 12345. And what I'll do is configure. This time I won't specify T or terminal, but it works perfectly fine. And then I'll say hostname N9K3. And I'll say I want to boot the Nexus operating system from the boot flash, and the file I want to boot from is going to, or boot to, is going to be NX703. So one more, and then we'll be done. So in this instance, I am going to say NXOS12345, NXOS12345, and then no, and then enter configuration mode. And this will be the last switch that I want to configure. And that's pretty much all there is to getting the devices at least up and operational. So if I come in here and say admin NXOS12345 and say config hostname N9K4, and then go ahead and fix that issue with the boot. Now all I want to do is I want to save my configuration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say copy, run, start. Copy, run, start. Copy, run, start. And copy. Copy, run, start. All right, so this should allow me to save the running configurations of all my devices. I'm just going to wait till this is 100. Every one of them is at 100%, and I get presented with my configurational prompt there. And then I'll know everything is good to go. And that'll bring us to a close when it comes to the basic configuration of the switches. All I did was give them host names, and I set it up since they're virtual. You wouldn't have to do the boot NXOS on a real switch, but since this is a Nexus 1000V, a virtual switch, I want to make certain that it will survive a reload. So in order to be able to do that, you're going to execute that command of the boot NXOS and tell it where the NOx file is, because remember, it's a virtual machine and it doesn't actually have a compact flash card. So with that, we're going to go ahead and stop this portion of the video, and I will see you in the next one.